Hello everyone and welcome to the American Civil War Museum's Homefront Education Series, where we bring the stories of the Civil War and of Richmond, Virginia, straight to you at home. Now, my name is Joseph, but I am here joined today by one of our partners from the National Park Service here in Richmond, Candace Hart. So thank you, Ranger Candace.
Well, thank you for letting me come out and speak with y'all.
No, this is really great. I'm glad that we have such a partnership with the National Park Service that we can actually have these kinds of conversations, because the Park Service does a lot on these kinds of properties.
And I love our partnership. It allows us to be able to do a lot of stuff with other people in the city here to have these conversations too, to get us known and get people out to the sites.
Absolutely. And the site that we are on right now in particular is Chimborazo.
Yes.
So Chimborazo is where you have the medical museum here. So it's talking about medicine during the Civil War and how those kind of inventions and those innovations really took place. And I believe the United States' first major contribution to worldwide medicine comes out of the Civil Wars. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the medicine before the Civil War, it is really not what it is today by any means. In fact, it could be seen as very primitive. In a way, but they have a lot of knowledge for that time period. They had microscopes and things that they were using to study, urine and blood and things like that. But the Civil War really pushes advancements in the way medicine is done, and the way people are treated. Before the Civil War, Richmond was a city of 38,000 people, and there were only 3 hospitals here for that many people. Hospitals were not seen as a place to go when you were sick. They were seen as a place for the poor and the dirty. It was just, if you were a respectable person, you stayed at home and you were treated by a doctor who came to you. Right. So that mentality changes with the Civil War. Hospitals become kind of what they are today.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. I mean, to think about how hospitals just evolved over the course of the Civil War. And Chimborazo in particular is one of the largest. Is that correct as well?
Yeah, Chimborazo, it's kind of a yes and a no answer there. The Chimborazo Hospital, throughout the entirety of the war, it sees more patients here than any other hospital in the war. About 76,000 troops will come through Chimborazo Hospital. But if you're looking at bed size of how many troops it can hold at one time, it does get beat out by Winder Hospital, which is built on the other side of the city. Winder opens in 1862. Chimborazo opens in 1861. So Chimborazo's open for longer. It's able to see more patients, but it does get beat by Winder, so it's the second largest.
Well, I suppose it being of a certain size is nice, but I think one of the other parts of Chimborazo is actually its survival rate.
Oh, yes.
So can we talk a little bit about that? Like, what are they experiencing as far as actual success of getting people out of the hospital as well?
So Chimborazo Hospital is not this building right here.
Right.
This is just a weather station that was used in the 1900s. Chimborazo Hospital was a massive 150 building complex that set up here on this hill. It was a pavilion style hospital, which means it is separated. There are streets, there are alleys. They were hospitals built for airflow and circulation. They kept them very clean. They worked very hard. The surgeons, the matrons, everyone that was here kept it very clean. They tried very hard to just give a very good atmosphere. They had their own farms. They had their own canal boat to get supplies so that the soldiers could have food, good food to eat. And the circulation really helped. So their mortality rate was surprisingly very, very low for the time period. Of that 76,000 troops, 7,000 of them died.
Only 7,000?
Only 7,000.
Whoa.
So that's hugely good for the time period,
Yeah.
mortality rate. This is a time period they don't know what germs are.
Right.
Germ theory hasn't been published yet. That comes out 2 years after the Civil War. So they don't understand how germs work.
Right, and how it interacts with human bodies and how it transmits diseases as well.
Right.
And that's a really important part is we're talking about, we've mentioned this in other videos. We've talked about how the Civil War, more people die of disease than they do of battlefield injuries. And I'm assuming that the lack of germ theory plays a part of that.
Yes.
So we've got kids coming from all over the place,
Right.
mostly from farms that are getting into close quarters with one another, and they're getting sick. And so they're having to be pulled off the battlefield and they're brought here, right?
So that's one of the reasons why hospitals needed to happen here in Richmond. There are over 50 hospitals here during the Civil War. That is an estimated number because there were lots of people who opened up their homes to the sick very early on in the war. So just like you said, these young men are coming in from farms. They've only seen a few people in their life. They haven't built up any kind of immunities. And suddenly they're thrown into camps of thousands and they get sick very quickly. Measles, typhoid fever, tuberculosis spreads like wildfire through the camps. And so Richmond very early on, where the army is building, is swamped by lots of sick soldiers. And that's when they realized we've got to have somewhere to care for them. And Chimborazo starts being built.
Wow. Who's working at Chimborazo as well?
Most of the people who work here are enslaved
Oh, wow.
people. They are being hired from locals here in the city. They are being hired in to work here. But most of them, they are serving as nurses. They're doing the cooking, they're doing the cleaning, they're tending to whatever else needs to be done here on the site. They have a stable and all kinds of, a bakery, everything that is here, they're the ones who are doing most of the work. Chimborazo was built by slave labor.
Right.
So without them, Chimborazo would not operate.
Right.
And this is actually mentioned by Dr. McCall. Dr. McCall, James B. McCall, is the one who runs this facility, and he actually writes to the Confederate Congress and says, I need to have these enslaved people here. You cannot send them out to dig earthworks because Chimborazo cannot operate without them.
Right.
So that is the main workforce here. They do have matrons who were women who were brought in to oversee the wards and to make sure that the cooking and the cleaning was being done. Now this is a time period in which women were not in the hospital, in the medical field. They were not seen as being able to handle the horrors of medicine. And so they weren't very welcomed when they came in, but they came in, and one of the most famous, Phoebe Pember, she is here at Chimborazo. She writes a diary and publishes it later of her life here at Chimborazo. So women are here working at Chimborazo, and then you also have your surgeons and assistant surgeons as well.
Wow. I'm thinking about the complex nature, overlapping nature of all these different people that are involved with it. I mean, Chimborazo is a good way that we can see in microcosm what's happening across, the United States. So in both the Confederate States and the United States, you have all these hospitals that are being built to tend and treat the sick and wounded.
Right.
By the end of the Civil War, we have estimates to have it around 700,000 people have died.
Yes.
And many, many, many more have gotten sick or been victims of crippling injuries. And so these hospitals become essential places across what is now the United States.
Yes.
So it's really interesting to know that kind of labor that's being done, the people who are doing the cooking and the cleaning and the building of the spaces, in many cases are enslaved people in the Confederacy, and some free people as well, free people of color.
There were some free people of color here as well who served the entire time working for Chimborazo, and were paid very well for it too.
And I think it's interesting, I think many times we often overlook the experiences of free people of color living in the South.
Yes.
Which you mentioned those earthworks that are being built outside that people are saying, oh no, you can't take enslaved workers from Chimborazo to build those, but free people of color are also being taken to build those earthworks too.
They're being impressed.
Yes. So they're being forced into those situations where they're being conscripted to work on those earthworks, but there are also some of them who are working here. Do we know any stories about any of them, or at least any names that we might have either?
Well, one of them is named Candace, which is my name. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why McCall is definitely against this impressment for his people here at Chimborazo, because they cannot operate without the enslaved people, but also the free, the blacks here around Richmond. So he knows that they very well could be forced out of Chimborazo and into those earthworks to dig those earthworks. There is a free black community outside of Richmond that was forced to do the digging. So yes, that is a definite concern for them working here, that they could be forced out to do that manual labor somewhere else.
Right.
But yeah, that's happening.
I mean, there's, I'm sure, a ton of incredible stories that we just won't have the time to get into today, with only a single video for this, but this has been great. I've really enjoyed having this conversation with you. Hopefully we'll get to step inside and see some of the actual artifacts that are inside the exhibit here. But thank you so much, Candace, for joining us today.
Oh, well, no, thank you for letting me come out and enjoy the nice day with you. I mean, this is great.
It is a beautiful day.
It is.